Everyone always says real love shows up in grand gestures. Roses on Valentine's Day, surprise trips, big diamond rings. And look, I get it. Those things feel good. But after more than 30 years working with couples in my practice, I can tell you with absolute certainty that's just the surface. That's the highlight reel. The real stuff, it hides in the simplest words, the ones that barely get noticed. I've sat across from some of the most remarkable women you could ever meet. Smart, accomplished women who've lived full lives, raised families, built careers, survived things that would break most people. And yet they kept choosing men who drained them emotionally. Men who made them feel like they were always auditioning for a role they'd already earned. And the reason wasn't that these women were broken or naive. It's that nobody ever taught them what real mature love actually sounds like. There's something you need to understand, and if you don't, you'll keep misreading the signals. You'll keep mistaking intensity for love, possession for care, empty promises for real commitment. And I know that hurts to hear, but I'd rather be honest with you than comfortable. Today, I want to walk you through 12 phrases, 12 specific things a man says when he truly deeply loves you. Not infatuation, not obsession, not that early stage rush that feels like fireworks but burns out by spring. I'm talking about the kind of love that holds steady, the kind that actually lasts. Let's start with the first one, and it might surprise you. I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me. Now, I know some of you just paused on that, because we've been conditioned by movies, by songs, by every rom-com ever made, and to think that love means, I can't live without you. That need, that desperation feels romantic. It activates something in your brain, literally. That kind of possessive language spikes dopamine. It makes you feel chosen, special, irreplaceable. But here's what I've learned from over 3 decades in clinical practice. That same possessiveness also spikes cortisol, your stress hormone. Your body is registering that as a threat, even while your heart is calling it passion. The adrenaline you feel in those relationships, a lot of it is anxiety, not love. Your brain just can't always tell the difference. A man who can genuinely say, I want you to be happy, even if that's not with me, he's operating from a completely different place. He's not in survival mode. He doesn't need to possess you to feel whole. He's done his own internal work. He's healed enough to love from abundance instead of emptiness. And that, my friends, is rare. One of my patients, I'll call her Margaret. She was 64 when she came to see me. She'd been married twice. Both times to men who said, you're mine on the first date, and thought that was romantic. She came in after her second divorce, exhausted, convinced she just had bad luck. What I helped her see was that she'd been chasing intensity her whole life. When she finally met a man who said, your happiness matters more than my ego, she almost walked away because it didn't feel exciting enough. She had to learn that calm isn't the absence of love. Sometimes calm is love. The second phrase is so simple it gets overlooked constantly. How was your day? I know. Sounds basic. But here's what the neuroscience tells us. When someone asks that question and actually means it, when they put their phone down, make eye contact, and genuinely want to know, that interaction releases oxytocin in both of you. It's the bonding hormone. It's the thing that builds real intimacy over time. The difference between a man who asks out of habit and a man who asks because your inner world genuinely matters to him. You can feel it in your bones. One is filling silence. The other is building connection. A man who wants to know about your Tuesday, your frustrations, your small victories, your weird dreams. He's saying, you're not just someone I sleep next to. You're something. You're someone. I've had so many women in my office over the years, women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who tell me they haven't felt truly heard in decades. They've had partners who showed up for the big moments but disappeared in the everyday. And the everyday is where real love lives. Research on long-term couples confirms it. Daily emotional connection matters more for relationship longevity than any grand romantic gesture. Those small check-ins, they're building what researchers call love maps. a detailed internal picture of who your partner is, what matters to them, what scares them, what lights them up. Don't underestimate a man who wants to know how your day went. The third phrase is one that a lot of men never learn to say, and it costs them everything. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Now, in neuroscience, genuine apology requires the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of the brain, to override the limbic system where ego lives. That's not easy for anybody. But it's particularly hard for people who grew up in environments where admitting fault felt dangerous, where being wrong meant being weak, where apology was seen as losing. A man who can say, I was wrong, and mean it has done serious emotional work. He's developed what I call a flexible ego, the ability to hold a healthy sense of self-worth while still owning his mistakes. That kind of humility, it's not weakness, it's some of the strongest emotional muscle there is. I've worked with couples where one partner's inability to ever apologize quietly destroyed 30 years of history together. Every unacknowledged hurt, every unrepaired wound, every time the word sorry stayed stuck behind someone's pride. It accumulates. I call it relational toxicity buildup. Over time, it poisons trust, erodes intimacy, and eventually the connection just collapses. For those of you who've lived through relationships like that, you already know. You know what it feels like to keep hoping someone will just say, I was wrong, and they never do. You've learned the hard way that a relationship where no one can be wrong is a relationship where no one gets to be human. The fourth phrase is about presence. I'm here for you. This sounds straightforward, but the neurobiology behind it is profound. When we're going through something hard, our nervous system goes into high alert. We need co-regulation. We need someone whose steadiness can help us process the storm. When a man says, I'm here for you, and actually stays, he's offering something that goes way beyond romance. He's offering neurological safety. But I want to make something clear because I see this confusion constantly. There's a massive difference between being physically present and being emotionally available. I've worked with plenty of men who stayed in the room but checked out completely. There with their bodies, gone with their hearts. That's not being there. That's just occupying space. Real presence requires what therapists call emotional attunement, the ability to feel and respond to your partner's emotional state, to sit with your pain without trying to fix it, without minimizing it, without making it about himself. And here's something I want to say directly to some of you because I've seen this pattern enough to know it's real. A lot of women who've been let down over and over develop what I call resistance to emotional support. You've become so independent, so self-sufficient, that when someone actually offers to be there, it feels uncomfortable. Suspicious even. You've protected yourself so many times that softening feels dangerous. That's not a flaw. That's a reasonable response to being hurt. But real love requires the courage to let someone witness your full humanity, including the vulnerable parts. The right man won't run when he sees you struggling. He'll move closer. The fifth phrase stopped one of my patients cold the first time she heard it. Thank you for existing. I had a patient, I'll call her Carol. She was 71, and she'd been widowed, then spent years in a relationship that was convenient but emotionally hollow. When a new man in her life said, thank you for being alive, she literally didn't know how to respond. She called me the next day and said, Audrey, what do I do with that? She'd spent so much of her life earning love, being useful, being capable, being agreeable, that being loved simply for existing felt completely foreign. This phrase operates on what we call unconditional positive regard. He doesn't love what you do or what you provide. He loves who you are at the core. And neurologically, when someone we love expresses that, it activates the same brain circuits that light up when an infant feels their mother's unconditional love. It's healing at a primal level. In a culture that constantly evaluates us on productivity, appearance, and usefulness, especially as we get older, to hear thank you for existing is like water in a desert. A man who can say that genuinely has developed what I call existential appreciation. He sees past the roles you play, past the functions you serve in his life, and recognizes the miracle of your actual presence on this earth. The sixth phrase is the one I use most often in couples therapy. We'll figure it out together. This single phrase tells me more about the health of a relationship than almost anything else. When problems come up, and they always do, the primitive brain wants to either fight or flee, attack or abandon. But emotionally mature people choose a third option: collaborate. We'll figure it out together is a declaration of partnership. He's not swooping in to rescue you from a paternalistic position. He's not abandoning you to handle it alone. He's standing next to you, facing the problem as a team. Neurologically, genuine collaboration releases oxytocin in both partners, reduces the perception of threat, and literally syncs your brainwaves. You start thinking better together than you do apart. This mindset shift, from you versus me to us versus the problem, sounds small. It's not. I've watched couples destroy themselves because every conflict became a war of egos. Two people so determined to be right that they lost everything they were fighting for. Real love doesn't work like that. In real love, you either both win or you both lose. The seventh phrase is one that separates love from codependency. You make me want to be a better man. This one requires nuance because it can get confused with codependency, and I want to be clear about the difference. In codependency, he needs you to function. In mature love, he's inspired by you to evolve. You don't complete what's missing in him. You activate what's already there. That's a fundamentally different dynamic. A man who says this genuinely has what psychologists call a growth mindset in relationships. He doesn't see the relationship as a fixed state of compatibility. He sees it as a living dynamic process of mutual evolution. I'll be direct with you about something because I've seen it too many times in my office to stay quiet. I've worked with extraordinary women who stayed in relationships that made them smaller, that made them question their worth, that turned them into gray, diminished versions of themselves. And they stayed because they were afraid of being alone, because they thought something was better than nothing. Here's the truth. A relationship that doesn't help you grow is quietly killing you. A man who genuinely says, "You make me better," isn't just giving you a compliment. He's telling you that love has expanded him. That's what real love does. It doesn't shrink you. It opens you up to dimensions of yourself you didn't know existed. The eighth phrase is built on something we don't talk about enough. I trust you. Trust activates oxytocin and dramatically reduces cortisol. When someone truly trusts you, your nervous system can relax. You don't have to perform or manage their insecurities. You can just be. But I want to break down what real trust actually looks like, because not all trust is the same. There's basic trust, believing you won't intentionally cause harm. There's practical trust, believing you'll follow through on your word. And then there's deep trust, believing in your fundamental integrity, your character, your capacity to choose love even when things get hard. A man who truly trusts you has learned to separate his internal insecurities from external reality. He's not projecting old wounds onto your current behavior. He's chosen consciously to believe in you. I want to say something here to those of you who've had partners who called their control love, who checked your phone, who questioned your friendships, who kept tabs on where you were and called it caring. That is not love. That is fear wearing love's clothing. Real love doesn't interrogate. Real love doesn't restrict. Real love trusts, and in that trust, it frees you. The ninth phrase is simple, but most people do it wrong. I hear you. Let me tell you the neurological difference between hearing and listening. When someone truly listens, not waiting for their turn to talk, not preparing their counter-argument, not minimizing what you're saying, specific brain regions associated with safety and well-being activate. You feel seen, validated, important. Real listening is a skill, and it requires three things that most people honestly never develop: complete presence, suspension of judgment, and genuine empathy. Not sympathy, empathy. The ability to actually feel alongside you without getting lost in his own emotions. I've heard women in my practice say, "He says he hears me, but then nothing changes." That's not listening. That's selective hearing dressed up to look like care. Genuine listening transforms something in the listener. It creates understanding, shifts perspective, changes behavior when behavior needs to change. You deserve a man who finds your mind fascinating, who comes away from your conversations knowing something new, who lets what you say actually land and shift him. That's what real listening does. It doesn't just receive information, it honors your humanity. The 10th phrase shows up in the smallest, most overlooked moments. You look tired. Can I help? I call this applied emotional intelligence. It requires 3 neurologically complex skills happening simultaneously: conscious observation, genuine empathy, and proactive action. He has to be present enough to actually notice you. Not just see you, but notice you. He has to have the emotional maturity to read your nonverbal signals correctly. and he has to feel genuinely motivated to do something about it without needing credit for it. This kind of anticipatory care is only possible in a man who has what attachment researchers call secure attachment. His self-worth doesn't depend on being needed. He helps because your well-being actually matters to him, because seeing you well makes him happy. That's the difference between a man who helps to feel like a hero and a man who helps because he loves you. I want to say something to those of you who've had your needs ignored for so long that you've started to believe you're too much, or that asking for help is a burden. You've normalized emotional neglect to the point that genuine care feels suspicious. You don't have to earn basic support. You don't have to be falling apart before someone is allowed to help you. Mature love doesn't wait for the crisis. It anticipates. It shows up before you have to ask. The 11th phrase redefines the whole relationship. You and I, we're a team. This isn't just romantic language. This is a declaration of how he sees the entire architecture of your relationship. And in neurological terms, when two people genuinely operate as a team, their brains begin to synchronize, particularly in areas related to decision-making and problem-solving. You think better together. You're stronger together. You and I are a team means he's not competing with you. He's not keeping score. He's not threatened by your success or your strength. He's standing alongside you, facing life as a unit. His wins are your wins. Your challenges are his challenges. I want to acknowledge something here because the comments and conversations I've had over the years have shown me this is real. Many women, especially those who grew up in households where love was a competition or scarcity, have internalized patterns of competition rather than collaboration. Even in relationships, you might find yourself bracing for the power struggle, waiting for him to pull rank. A man who means we're a team dismantles all of that. There's no rank, there's no pulling, there's just two people who've chosen each other and are choosing to move through life together with their full strength combined. And that brings us to the 12th phrase, the one that holds all the others together. I love you, not just when things are good. This is the difference between infatuation and real love, laid completely bare. Infatuation is conditional. It shows up when you're glowing, when you're fun, when things are easy. It fades when life gets hard, when you're scared, when you're grieving, when you're not your best self. Mature love is a decision, a daily conscious choice that doesn't depend on the weather or your mood or whether you handled everything perfectly this week. When a man loves you in your dark days, when you're exhausted or grieving or short-tempered or just plain struggling, he's offering you something that goes beyond romance. He's offering you a refuge. He's saying, your value doesn't fluctuate with your emotions. Your place in my life doesn't depend on your ability to be perfect. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a license for destructive behavior. This is not about tolerating abuse or mistreatment. This is about love that remains steady through the normal storms of a human life. Love that doesn't threaten to leave every time there's conflict. Love that doesn't withdraw every time you're not performing at your best. That kind of love is real. I've seen it. I've seen it in women in their 60s who found it after decades of settling. I've seen it in women in their 70s who thought they'd missed their chance. It exists, and you deserve it. Now, before I wrap up, I want to address something that's come up in conversations with my patients and in the questions I hear from women all over the country. Some of you are wondering how to do the internal work to tell the real thing from the imitation, because that's the real question, isn't it? It's not just, what does real love sound like? It's, how do I make sure I don't mistake a copy for the original again? The answer isn't a checklist you run through on a first date. It's a practice. It's learning to pay attention to how you feel in someone's presence over time. Not just the excitement of the beginning, but the steadiness of the middle. Does he show up consistently? Do his actions match his words over weeks and months, not just in the shiny early moments? Does being around him make you more yourself or less yourself? Does he create space for you to grow, or does he quietly shrink you? The work starts inside you. Learning to trust your own instincts again after they've been manipulated. Learning to sit with the discomfort of healthy love when you've been conditioned to mistake chaos for passion. Learning to believe you are worth the kind of love I just described. Not when you're at your best, but always. Here's what I want you to take with you today. Real love isn't loud. It doesn't pressure you or manipulate you or make you feel like you're always one wrong move away from losing it. Real love expresses itself in daily consistency, in emotional presence, in someone who sees your soul and keeps choosing to stay. If you're in a relationship right now, I want you to honestly ask yourself, how many of these 12 things have you actually heard, backed up by real action, not just words? And if you're not in one, I want you to use these 12 as your standard, not as a perfect checklist that every human being will check off flawlessly, but as a compass, a direction, a reminder of what's actually possible. Because it is possible. And you, at whatever age you are, whatever you've been through, whatever you've survived, you still deserve it. All of it. And while you're waiting or while you're building, keep developing in yourself the capacity to love this way. Because the love you give always comes back. It always finds its way home.